Hello, wonderful leader. This is Taaka. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. In every episode of this podcast, we uncover powerful insights, share real-world experiences, and deliver practical strategies to help you excel as a leader. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. I am super excited today because I always say each time I have a very special guest. But this is a special guest that I have with me today, and we're recording from none other than Kampala, Uganda. And the guest I have is Madam Judy Obitre-Gama. Let me tell you a little bit about Judy. She's a Ugandan lawyer, academic, and public servant. But many of you, particularly those of you in Uganda, will know her as the former executive director of the National Identification and Registration Authority. I know a lot of you in your different countries have the agency, the body that regulates or that manages and produces national IDs. That's the equivalent in Uganda, the National Identification and Registration Authority. Yeah? But Judy also served as the board secretary of the Uganda Registration Services Bureau from July 2012 to June 2015. Judy also served as a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, Makerere University. That's our preeminent university here in Uganda. As an environmental lawyer with the National Environment Management Authority, and she also served as the head of legal and surveillance and company secretary at the Uganda Securities Exchange. That's the SEC. Yeah? So all of this, you should know that Judy pioneered all the above positions. In other words, people were not there before, but Judy came in to step into this, not step in, but almost create these new roles. Huh?
Apart from the lecturing.
Yes, apart from the lecturing. Lecturers have always been there, right? But beyond her executive roles, Judy has contributed to various boards, and particularly the one many of you know of is that Judy served on the board of the Bank of Uganda, the Central Bank of Uganda. Huh? So you can just hear from her background, you can imagine, Judy holds a Bachelor of Laws. Yes, she's a lawyer from Makerere University, a diploma in legal practice from the Law Development Center, and an LLM, a Master's of Law from the University of London. So that is her formal bio. Now let me give you her informal bio. And I'll tell you, and this is why I've said this is a special guest. I have known Judy, and we were just doing the calculation before we came on camera. We calculated, I've known Judy for 44 years. And people, please stop doing the math to start dating me. But 44 years, because Judy and I were in boarding school together at Gayaza High School, yes. From S2, yes. We realized. And I have to tell you one thing about Judy. People who know me knew I was always trying in those days. I think they don't do it as much, but remember in those days they used to have positions. Mm-hmm. So after you do the exams, they're like, okay, who came first, who came second, who came third? As soon as I was in class with Judy, and I was always in class with Judy, I knew just forget about that first position, because the person that would always beat me would be Judy. So yes, Judy is one of the cleverest people I know. Absolutely brilliant. But more importantly, for this conversation on leadership, over the 44 years I've known Judy, it means I've not just seen her from afar in terms of the leadership roles she has played that I just described, but I have also seen Judy's character, her values and integrity. And you know that's something we talk about. This whole episode is about showcasing different leaders, dispelling the narrative that we don't have good leaders with character and integrity in Africa. We do. And I know over all these years, I've seen Judy with that integrity. So I pulled her onto this podcast because I was particularly interested around someone who you could hear from her bio has served in government. How does somebody with strong integrity end up navigating the public sector space? So we'll come to that. Before I jump in, let me just invite Judy to just say a little bit about her leadership journey. I've given the formal bio, but sometimes it's nice to hear it directly from you. Tell us about your leadership journey, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Taaka. And yes, Taaka is my good friend and has been my good friend for that number of years. I mean, I don't mind if you start calculating and working out our age. I think we're aging
proud of our
gracefully.
ages. Yes.
Yes. So thank you very much, Taaka. I just want to add a little bit to the formal bio.
Yes.
So my registration was at the London School of Economics.
Okay.
And political science.
Yes.
So I keep on saying I'm a proud alumna of London School of Economics, though at the time it was an intercollegiate LLM at the University of London. When I returned, my first ever job was with a private company called Fourways Investments Limited.
Okay.
It is a holding company. At that time, it had so many subsidiary companies, I think like 14.
Okay.
It was an interesting introduction into the work environment from true private sector in terms of it's a private company.
Yes.
So, I always keep on telling Mr. Mahmoud Tobani, the MD, that he was the very, very first employer, and therefore I hold him. He has a special place in my employment life. Yeah. I'm a lawyer, yes. I'm also an advocate of the courts of judicature of Uganda. So following from Fourways Investments, I moved into lecturing.
Okay.
And the rest you have spoken about.
Yes.
And I've done quite a bit of consulting and some research work as well. So my leadership journey, I would say that the true leadership, I mean, you always lead self, right?
Yes,
so
I love that.
The leadership journey is all along my life, so to speak, because of leading self. But in terms of being in formal leadership position, the first formal leadership position I would say was at the Uganda Securities Exchange as head of legal and surveillance and as company secretary. And the capital markets were nascent. Not too many people knew about them. And the stock exchange was new. And so we worked on getting the right regulations in place, trying to attract listings and build the Ugandan Securities Exchange. We worked closely with Kenya and with Tanzania, and we had an East African association of securities exchanges, which built us as Uganda Securities Exchange. So collaboration has always been a part of my leadership journey. And you do learn from those who have gone before you, because the Nairobi Stock Exchange was the giant and still to a large extent is today. But working with them, working with Tanzania and later on Rwanda, we were able to build ourselves in capacity, in developing the capital markets industry from the securities exchange perspective and in trying to get more listings. So that is a lesson I learned while at Uganda Securities Exchange, which of course is private sector. My next leadership experience was at the Uganda Registration Services Bureau as the board secretary. As the board secretary...
What is the Uganda Registration Bureau?
The Uganda Registration Services Bureau is the equivalent of what many have as registrar generals in Africa. So,
for those in Ghana, that was our former Registrar General's Department, even they have a new name.
Exactly, yes. So, URSB deals with the business registry. So it's got companies, it's got partnerships, it's got business associations. It now has a chattels registry as well, and so on in the business registry. It also deals, it's the office responsible for intellectual property in Uganda. So, trademarks, patents, utility designs, copyright, and all of that. Yeah. And then it has it's the official receiver. And so it deals with insolvency. Yeah. And it administers the Insolvency Act of Uganda.
Okay.
It used to have a civil registration
Okay.
as a function, and so
Okay.
you register births, you register deaths, you record adoption orders,
Okay.
and you also register marriages.
Okay.
But that has since changed.
Okay.
And while I was at the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, the National ID project commenced. And it commenced in 2013.
Okay.
So what happened was that in order to have this ID project, the official name was the National Security Information System.
Okay.
But it's, generally known as the National ID project. So
Yes.
I'll stick to that. So what happened was that in order to have this project run efficiently
Yes.
and identify and register Ugandans within the shortest time possible, in order to beat the electoral roadmap
Yes.
for the 2016 elections, it was necessary to bring together all those ministries, departments, and agencies that had anything to do with identification or registration of persons. And so the steering committee
Okay.
of the ID project had included on it agencies like Uganda Registration Services Bureau. And so that was my first interaction with the ID project. We did have assigned to the project representation from the Civil Registration Directorate of URSB.
Okay.
I would occasionally act as Registrar General when the Registrar General is out of office. So it is on such occasions that I had direct interaction with the steering committee when they were holding their meetings. So that was my interaction there. But I just wanted to roll back a bit to URSB. When I joined URSB, it had just become a semi-autonomous agency. The law establishing it was old, but what had happened was that all the staff from the Registrar General's department were transferred to URSB on secondment.
Okay.
And in July of 2011, it was now given its semi-autonomous status.
Okay.
And they then started recruiting people for the different positions and so on. And that's how I joined in July 2012 as the board secretary. And I want to say that during the period that I was there, led by the Registrar General then, Mr. Bemanya Twebazi, immense reform of URSB was done. And it moved from an agency where turnaround was so slow to one where the client charter required you to deliver services to the public within a specified period of time. The leakages in terms of finance were curtailed, they were blocked, and the agency now started collecting more non-tax revenue for government than ever before. And that has continued to grow.
Fantastic.
And so I am happy that I was part of the reform of URSB.
Before you even go further, because this is interesting, because the story you tell of the Registrar General at that time, Mr. Bemanya, and the way he was able to drive reform, and many of us in our different African countries know that that's quite a sensitive agency. Yeah? What are 2 to 3 leadership qualities you saw in Mr. Bemanya that enabled him to drive reform at that time in the agency?
One, he was focused on delivering the mandate of the agency. He was focused on ensuring that you had people access birth certificates, death certificates in time. He was focused on having the company registrar registry being efficient so that our business index would improve. And that also means then that the economic delivery in the country improves. He was focused on ensuring that the IP, Intellectual Property Office, is able to deliver, because intellectual property is a means through which innovations are brought in, and it's another form of business. And so he attracted goodwill from that focus. He networked. He networked in order to attract goodwill towards the institution, in order to attract funding towards the institution, in order to make things move. I must say, by the time I was leaving, we were discussing the plans for the building of a URSB home. And that building now exists as the Business Facilitation Center. It has URSB, it has the Investment Authority, it has the Capital Markets Authority. I'm not sure who else it has, but it's there. So he remained focused on his purpose, and it is something that I learned from him.
Nice.
He had a lot of detractors.
Yes.
He remained focused. He also had a supportive team, and I was part of that team. I mean, not everybody was good support, but another lesson I learned is that as long as you have core support, you can move, because many times not everybody will, support you, but then you can move. And so he had a supportive team that he encouraged, and he was also fair. He was also fair. He treated everybody in the same way. There was no favoritism or things like that. You had to, and everybody knew that you had to stick to what you're supposed to do. Innovation was encouraged, new ideas were encouraged, but man, you had to do your work. Otherwise you'd
So he held you accountable?
Huh? Yes, he held everybody accountable to the T.
I love that. So Mr. Bebanya, wherever you are, just know that you are representing a wonderful example. Again, we always say that there are no good examples, but this is a wonderful example of the leadership required to reform our African state institutions. In this case, a semi-autonomous agency.
He's actually Director General of ARIPO. The African Regional Intellectual Property Organization.
Big shout out. So he's gone on now to have a continental-wide impact. Big shout out to you, because we heard you were focused on your purpose. You had detractors. And again, this is something we're learning and we're going to talk more about. As you seek to drive change as a leader, and many of these institutions, not just our non-profits, private sector, but I would say particularly maybe in our public sector institutions, you will have detractors. You will have those that will bring you down. But I hear he also had a team of supporters, which included yourself. He was fair and he held people to account. Okay, so let's quickly, I want to hear your story. So let's fast forward to now NIRA, the national identification, how you got into that role. And maybe say a little bit about why you accepted the role as the first executive director of I'm going to keep saying NIRA, folks, but just know that stands for the National Identification and Registration Authority, which is how do we frame it? It's a semi-autonomous agency in Ghana, responsible
in Uganda.
In Uganda. You can see my bias. In Uganda. Responsible for providing everybody eligible for national IDs. All right, so tell us, when you accepted the role as the executive director of NIRA, what vision did you carry with you? And I know you've told the story, it was a new body coming in. So what was your vision for this new agency that was being formed?
All right, so I accepted the position of executive director of NIRA with a certain level of trepidation. I was very happy in my role as board secretary of URSB. I had done a lot. I had contributed a lot, and I wanted to contribute more. But then I thought, all right, I've been called to step up. Let me step up. And so I accepted the role to lead the secretariat of this institution with the vision that, one, this would be a critical institution in the country. It was going to continue to identify and register all Ugandans. It had the National Identification Register of Uganda. In order to make the register dynamic, the birth and death registration function was immediately removed from URSB and brought to NIRA. Okay? So in the law that set up NIRA, the Registration of Persons Act, birth and death were part of what NIRA would do, but because it was an ongoing function of URSB, the law said a statutory instrument would be issued to commence birth and death registration. So this register was supposed to be the one register for natural persons in the country, so that everybody, every institution in Uganda that required person information, this would be the point of call. And so it was very, very important. So my vision was to have all Ugandans identified, registered. And you know, when you are identified, when you are registered, you are counted, okay? You are a citizen of the country. In planning, they're going to plan for you. And so it is such a core thing.
Yes.
So that was one, to have everybody registered and counted. To have an institution that speaks to the needs of the country and that contributes to the progress of the country.
Okay.
And really, that was my vision. And to have a team that leads, that is an example, so that you know that you can have an efficient public sector institution. Also to bring in whatever was new, whatever was good to this institution, so that it becomes a premier institution in Uganda and an example to others in Africa and the world at large.
I love that. And I'm sure those listening and watching can relate, because increasingly in most of our countries, there's very little you can do without your national ID. You want to get a SIM card, national ID.
Yes.
You want to do any banking, national ID. I mean, it's just increasingly
land transactions,
national ID.
Bank
so this
accounts.
becomes a very critical document to have. And that also means in terms of enjoying certain rights,
Yes.
to be able, it's important that you have the kind of institution that enables all of those, whether you have connections or not, whether you're in a rural area or not. As you're saying, it has to become a premier inclusive institution.
Yes.
But as you can imagine, because IDs are so critical, it's also a very politically sensitive institution and has been in all our countries. And so I can imagine leading such an institution. You're in the hot water.
Yes.
You're in the hot water. And partly, and I have to again say to those listening to us, you heard our earlier episode with Yao and Sako, where when I asked him, what does Africa need to launch? And he was saying we need strong we need a strong state, not necessarily all in the executive. We need strong institutions throughout government. And so I think an example of NIRA is an example of those strong institutions that are able to provide service, this important service to all of us as citizens. So understanding the leadership required to create, because this is about forming and creating a strong state institution, semi-autonomous agency, is critical to understand. And I think Judy can give us firsthand. It's not theory, it's firsthand. So therefore, my question to you, Judy, as you look back at the time you served as executive director at NIRA, what were the leadership traits that enabled you, or that proved most useful in such a politically sensitive role?
One, you really need to keep your integrity at the forefront.
Core.
At the core. Because you have your mandate clearly laid out for you in the law. You need to be able at all times to stick to delivering your mandate and to aiding others, okay, in delivering their mandates in the way in which your mandate allows you to do so. For example, you gave the example of SIM card registration that requires a national ID. And in Uganda, telecoms are regulated by the Uganda Communications Commission.
Okay.
So you need to be able to have an efficient link with Uganda Communications Commission in order for them to deliver that part of their mandate. So you need to be able to be clear in your mind about what it is you're supposed to deliver and how you're going to deliver it. And in doing that, you need to have your integrity intact because you are going to have a lot of interference coming in. So your integrity must be intact. If it isn't, you're going to be thrown off track. And when you're thrown off track, and it is a question of integrity, and then you'll be in a lot of trouble. And when you are in trouble, the institution is in trouble. And if that trouble takes you down, the institution also suffers downtime. Of course, it will rise again. It's an institution, but it does suffer downtime. So, and you need to be, and of course, with integrity goes the question of accountability. You need to be a person that takes accountability seriously. You're accountable to the public. You're accountable to the appointing authority. You are accountable to your board. You are accountable to yourself. So you take accountability seriously. And when you do so, it will be difficult. I mean, there's always all sorts of headwinds, but to throw you off track will be very difficult. It may delay you in terms of how many steps you can take forward, but you will continue moving forward. I think also you need to be able to collaborate. You need to be able to network with other institutions, with other actors in government, with persons from whom you can draw strength. You need that because in these sorts of journeys, especially when you see, the thing is, when you're a leader, you're the one who's out there. When I was in a certain organization, there's one person who would say, I like where I am. I'm flying below the radar, okay?
Yes.
And I would always laugh at him. But when I was the leader of NIRA, I truly appreciated flying above where the radar will pick you, okay? So you need to be able to stand straight, to stand firm. And your strength may waver along the way. So you need to be able to draw from those networks. One, to give you guidance. You get guidance from people who've been there before, who faced challenges before, or who are just wise. From those who encourage you, from those who refill you when you're about to run empty.
Yes.
So I think
those were some of
there are more, but I think for now,
we'll stop now. And you know what's so interesting? Because I'm hearing integrity, accountability, and the ability to collaborate with others. And I hear different types of others.
Yes.
Some of the others might be other institutions that enable you to fulfill your mandate, but you need to be very clear on who's doing what. But also others who fill your tank, give you strength.
Yes.
And also others who provide wisdom and guidance. Those are the three key things. And what's so interesting, again, those listening or watching us, if you hear our previous episode with Mr. Dan Domlevo, he was the previous Auditor General of Ghana, equally sensitive role, as you can imagine. It's very interesting. He's saying the same things that you have. That integrity is key, and that becomes the starting point. So what we're truly hearing is that the leadership we need in our African state institutions has to be grounded in integrity. And I guess we've always almost instinctively known that, but we know now you need more than integrity to survive and thrive. And I think you're beginning to hint at what else? Accountability, all of that, and the support you have around you. Let's get a bit more granular in terms of that's, what you had to face. So maybe my next question for you is, as you said, even as you are mentioning Mr. Bemania, who had his detractors, and I know you also had your detractors. You faced resistance, and those who have integrity and trying to do things in government, we know it, they face resistance, they face backlash. What did that look like for you? What were those challenges you faced as you tried to lead with integrity and accountability?
As a leader, making decisions and solving problems can sometimes feel overwhelming. Having a thinking partner to help you reflect, gain clarity, and take charge of your situation is essential for personal and professional growth. This is where coaching comes in. At Busara Africa, we offer executive coaching guided by the ethics of the International Coaching Federation. Our internationally certified coaches bring years of experience and mastery of the coaching process, empowering you to take control of your leadership journey. Contact us today at www.busara-africa.com.
Are you doing too much? Feeling overwhelmed, yet still questioning if you're doing enough? Leading from within, the inner work of leadership is here to help. This monthly online program helps leaders like you build self-awareness, master emotional intelligence, and lead with confidence. With expert-led masterclasses, practical tools, and a curated resource library, you'll gain insights to lead with authenticity and impact on your schedule. So take a breath and join me on a powerful journey of inner work required to thrive and find your joy as a leader. Join now on www.busara-africa.com.
You will find those challenges coming at you from different angles.
Okay.
But I want to kind of ground where I think the main challenge came from for Nira.
Okay.
So Nira was born out of the ID project. As I mentioned at the beginning, the ID project had a timeline, okay? It had a timeline and you work backwards, okay? The election, 2016, and then you work backwards. It was a tight timeline. As a result, there were a lot of resources expended towards beating this timeline. And those resources included human resources. I've also mentioned that the steering committee was comprised of agencies that had something to do with registration, identification of persons, or with data management, so since all of this was going into a data system. And so you would have such agencies at the end of the day. By the way, those agencies became members of the board of NERA.
Okay.
So two things happened there. One, you had secondments from the different government ministries, departments, and agencies to the National ID project in order to deliver it. Two, you had these agencies that were collaborating. These agencies, as I said, became a part of the board. Now, they became a part of the board for the purpose was for them to collaborate, okay? To build synergies, since they are performing functions that are related to what NERA was supposed to be, what NERA is supposed to be delivering. However, the backside of that, the flip side, is if they become competitors, okay? Because you are basically in related business, then it becomes a bit difficult. But I must say, by and large, my board was very supportive, and that is how I managed to progress. The board term is a 4-year term. The executive director's term is a 5-year term. So, at 4 years, then a new board came in. But my board, by and large, that first board was very, very supportive, and it helped move the institution forward. Now, going back to the composition of the staff structure in the project, you have all of these secondments from the different agencies. What next? What happens when the project ends? And I think the problem here is that the project, yes, it did have an official project end document, but it kind of transitioned into NERA.
Okay.
And so when it came to recruitment into the established positions, which is what happened in my first year, we were setting up the institution, creating the organogram with the Ministry of Public Service, salary structures, and all those things that go into setting up an institution. And thereafter, the recruitment process started. And even before that, because there were so many hands on the job in order to beat the timeline, as the services kept on being delivered and targets kept being met, slowly but surely, people had to be let go of. So because, especially for those who were on secondment, there was now an expectation, legitimate or otherwise, there was now an expectation that they would be part of this.
The new institution.
Yes, this institution. For those that were let go of course, there was. They were dissatisfied. For some that remained, perhaps they didn't get the positions that they had anticipated. And so there was some dissatisfaction. And it took some time for people to keep on getting recruited on contract basis into NERA because of the wage bill, okay? So there was insufficient money to recruit the whole establishment structure. And so that created...
So there were a lot of unmet expectations that people had, so that created the disgruntled, the kind of murmuring and all of that, then that can bubble up into resistance.
Yes, so you had the internal disgruntled people, you had the external ones who had to leave. Yeah, so I think that really was a human resource challenge that kept on manifesting, manifesting. I think that was a major challenge. Also, you have now this agency with this document that is becoming the thing that is needed, okay?
When you say the document, the register.
The ID.
Oh, the ID,
the national ID that is becoming the thing that is needed. And you have to qualify for the national ID in the sense that you have to be a citizen in order to get the national ID.
Yes.
The proof of citizenship is done through other agencies of government that are responsible. The local council system that knows who, because it is done really at that local government level, because the local council system that knows who is and who isn't a citizen, and the security system that is able to sieve out through their processes who is and who isn't. So for some, it would take some time to be cleared for citizenship. And therefore, you apply for a national ID and you have to go through those processes. And so there would be some lag time. And then they would compare us with the driving permit. Hey, you apply for the driving permit, you can get your driving permit in, maybe 3 days or something. Why can that not be done for the national ID? The reason that you get your driving permit so fast is because the driving permit relies on your national ID. You have already been identified and registered. So it relies on your national ID. So for the citizenry, really, they had a problem with
the delays, how long
the
it was
time
taking,
lag, yes.
And yet they needed it so much.
Yes. And yet, you had to try your best to go through the sieve, which really wasn't your responsibility, but you're at the end, because once the applicant has been sieved, then you go through the identification process, you see? And you don't get the application, feed it into the system, and have the ID produced immediately, because you have to go through the biometrics to make sure that this is not a repeat and all of that. So there is always some days lag. But I think now that is better understood.
Okay.
There are more and more people that have been identified
Yes.
and registered. And so the turnaround time is now better.
Okay. Okay.
So resistance to
that
something new.
Yes.
The national ID, I can tell you, for example, that, unknown to me, earlier on, the Office of the Auditor General and the Ministry of Public Service had gone through a biometric registration of civil servants.
Okay.
So now, public service had that information. But what would they do with it? So they run their data. We run their data against ours on the National Identification Register. And there were a number of people who were caught out. There were those who were direct matches. You see, you match name, the information that is submitted, you match the biometrics. So there were some that were complete matches. There were others that had some discrepancy, say in date of birth and things like that, but generally you could try and match them. There were others that were only matched through their biometrics. And I can tell you the set of data in public service and the set of data in the National Identification Register were different. And so at the end of the day, it helped public service in cleaning up its payroll and its register, so to speak, of public servants. Of course, there were many who were not happy.
Okay, so let me quickly summarize some of the challenges, because I think, and I want to reframe some of the challenges in terms of what you experienced at NERA that others in other public sector institutions may face. One is around managing expectations. In your case, it was managing expectations of human resource. Those who were on the project and either were able to transition effectively into the authority, or those who didn't. And what that also, the ability to manage expectations of your human resource. But it's also managing the expectations of those you are there to serve, in that case, the citizens. And I think in NERA's case, it was particularly intense because we all need that ID and the delays in getting the ID. But I can imagine it could be the same with other agencies that are there to serve citizens. How are you managing the expectations in terms of what they need? So leaders' ability to navigate that. The second thing I hear as a challenge is as you introduce something new, you are now starting to move into the space of those who are enjoying the old that may not have been working.
Yes. Yes.
And so there's always, and again, don't worry, Mr. Domlevo talked about that a lot. I think part of cleaning up the public sector means, in fact, what he talked about was that sometimes when you find systems are not working, they're not working for a reason.
Yes. They're favoring some.
They're favoring some. Some are really benefiting from that. So as a leader coming in, you're stepping on the toes of those who are. So maybe my next question for you is this, is in the face of those challenges and resistance, give me 2 to 3 strategies you use to deal with the criticism. You are there in the limelight. You say above the radar. This one, you're not below a radar. You're above the radar. Everybody's seeing you. You're the one who's going to be in the newspapers every day with the attack. What are 2 to 3 strategies you used to get through that resistance, the public criticism? What did you do? 2 to 3 strategies.
One was sticking to what I was supposed to do. The focus I spoke about earlier on. The focus. Yeah. What is my job? What am I supposed to deliver? Am I delivering it? And letting that speak for itself. I'll give an example. This SIM card thing it blew out of proportion, and we're saying, hey, we are not responsible for SIM cards. We are responsible for national IDs, But it blew out of proportion, and somehow it had something to do with us.
So what do you mean the SIM card thing? For those who are not in Uganda.
Sorry, yes. I'm so sorry. So what happened was that people were getting SIM cards anyhow. There was no serious registration process. There was no serious mechanism through which you could identify who owned which SIM card. And some criminals had started using phones and committing crimes, and they couldn't be tracked. And so SIM card registration became a necessity. There had been some registration before the national ID, but now with the national ID, there was a mechanism through which you could track a person, okay, from SIM card to the person, and be able to, you know, carry out further investigations and see how to bring people to book. And so it was kind of like an emergency to get this thing sorted.
Okay, yes.
But, and NIRA somehow ended up being drawn into it. For some time was taking the flak for it because of the national ID. So national IDs were out there. We had set up what we called the third-party interface, which was a mechanism through which one could confirm a national ID. So what happens? You have the National Identification Register, and as I said, it's dynamic, real-time information. So when you get somebody presenting an ID as the document that identifies them, how do you authenticate it?
Yes.
How do you know that, yes, this is this person, I can see it's them, but how do you know that this ID is genuine, that they haven't gone and played around with some other person's ID? So we set up the third-party interface. It was an application interface so that the agencies and ministries and departments of government could be able to access it. And private sector institutions would access it through their regulator. So for example, the telecoms would access it through the Uganda Communications Commission. Why? Because, of course, we all know that there are very strict data requirements and privacy requirements. The regulator is responsible for ensuring that the regulated entities comply with it. Otherwise, they'll face regulatory sanctions from the regulator. So we went to Parliament, and gosh, did I have a bad day before the committee, okay? And there was so much trouble over this, that, and the other, and whatever. And it was all over the news that night and everything.
Blaming you all for the fact that people were not able to register
blaming me
their
for
SIM
all
codes.
sorts of things. Also, I mean, SIM card was just a tiny bit, but blaming me for all sorts of things. And I think it emanated really from the unmet expectations. But there was, because the question was, how do you deal with this? So
how did you deal with it? Stay focused.
Stay focused.
Yeah.
And I'm giving the example. So after a very bad day in Parliament, very bad evening in Parliament, which was all over national news, the next day I was meeting with the acting executive director of Uganda Communications Commission. We had imported SIM card readers identity card readers, because they hadn't yet set up, we had not yet completed at that point the setup of the third-party interface, and they too need to set up the interface on their side in order to speak to us. But because SIM card registration was so urgent, we had already in-house national ID readers that could authenticate. So we had set up a meeting with UCC. So the next day, in the morning, I was in the meeting with UCC at NIRA head office, handing over the national ID readers in order to enable SIM card registration to happen more seamlessly. And, getting on with my work, focused. And then, having been on television for, wrong purposes, the next day, I'm on television doing my work and moving forward. I got so much feedback like, how do you do that? But you do that because that is your job.
Nice.
Yes, challenges happen and they really can be hard to deal with, but you must remain focused.
So one day you're televised on TV in front of Parliament committee getting flagged, but the next day you're on TV showing that I'm still focused on my job.
Yes.
I've got to get this thing done. Nice. So stay focused. That's
one.
Number two?
Focused. Number two, you must be able to communicate with others. Okay, so in this case, you're having all these challenges. Make sure your communication lines with your board chairpersons is open so that they know what is going on and why, and they're able to give the support that they need to give you. Have your communication lines open, basically with your supervisors, whatever level that supervisory activity goes to. Have it open. And also try and have information out there on what you do, how you're delivering it, what your plans are, and all of that. And for me, that handing over of national ID readers gave me that opportunity to do it without looking like you're now having a press war. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. So I'm hearing the second is it's that open communication and being clear who you need to be communicating with.
Yes.
Clearly, if you're going to be getting lots of flack, those who you report to, it could be your board, it could be your CEO, whoever it is, needs to know exactly what you're doing so they can have your back, so they can support you.
Yes.
But also, the more people are able to just generally know what you're doing, that's what I'm hearing you say. You're always communicating about your purpose and your function.
Yes.
That information can counter any of the negative narrative that you...
And your deliverables. You show your deliverables, okay?
Okay.
You show your deliverables. Because you might say one thing and not be delivering anything.
Nice one. So people can actually... there's lots of flack. But always there's information to say, this is how I am delivering.
Yes.
I could talk to you forever, and I know there's so many stories we could share, but I need to wrap this up. Maybe my last question is going to actually come back to women in leadership, because folks will know that that's one of my passions. And how do we get a lot more women into the kinds of leadership roles that Judy has stepped into? And often women shy away from these roles. My last question is, do you think women in these roles almost face higher levels of scrutiny? And what advice would you give to a woman who's about to step into a similar high-profile public sector, potentially politically sensitive role?
Okay. So a woman is a person, okay? A woman is a person. And the woman must know that they are a person, meaning that they should not put themselves down in terms of, I am just a woman. Because I think that is something that happens sometimes, whether consciously or unconsciously, women compare themselves to men and start saying, I am just a woman, okay? So that's one. You are a person in your full rights. You are capable.
Yes.
You got this position by merit. You are able to deliver on what you have been asked to do. So be confident in yourself. Do not lose yourself. And let no one try and put you down for being a woman, because it's also a tactic. Oh, that woman. And then you may start thinking that, hey, I'm only a woman. That's why I've stressed that. Be yourself. You are a person. You are a strong person. You can deliver whatever it is you need to deliver. Your abilities are equal or better than some of your male counterparts. So be confident, be true to yourself, know and understand your purpose. Know and understand your purpose and stick to delivering that purpose. I've said delivery so many times and focus so many times, but stick to delivering that and learn how to brush off these distractions, because that is what they are. Because they come and throw all sorts of things at you because you're a woman in order to distract you. Learn how to keep that distraction at bay. I mean, I'm not saying that it can't hurt.
Yes.
It can hurt, but learn how to deal with your pain outside the office. Acknowledge it,
Yes.
Acknowledge it, otherwise it may come out in the wrong way, in the wrong place.
Yes.
But learn how to deal with your pain outside
How did you
the
deal with your
office.
pain?
Outside the office.
How did you
I mean,
deal
I
with
had
it
a very
outside?
good support system in terms of I had very good support from my family. I had very good support from my friends like Taaka, Yes. So I had a very good support system. I also had my beliefs, okay? So one is your value system. I mean, I keep on saying it is so important how you bring up children so that they have a core value system, that whatever they do, they can't shake it off, okay? And that value system you draw from. My dad told me when I was going into this job that take the job, stick to your principles, deliver. Whatever you do, stick to your principles, because that defines you. You will never lose yourself. And because your principles are right, you will never go wrong, okay? So that's one. Two, I, for one, I'm a Christian. I have a strong belief in God. And that faith also would buoy me. And there are those within the Christian community who provided me with support. So I'll not mention names, because if I do, I might miss out some, and that will offend. Yeah. But really, they gave me a lot of support. Yeah.
Nice. And this is what I'm hearing from you. It's interesting. You started out about saying be confident in yourself.
Yes.
And because many women have limiting beliefs about being a woman, therefore you're not enough because of how we've been socialized, all the patriarchy. But you're saying don't just totally believe in yourself, your capabilities. That's one. Number two, I'm hearing you say be clear about your purpose. Really be focused on that purpose. And I like the way you talked about the rest are distractions.
Yes.
Always be clear on that purpose. And as you focus, you came back to some of those other things. Focus on your delivery, what you're there to do. That's about the clarity of purpose. Third, I heard you talk about is your support system. Have a support system. You heard from Judy.
You need
family, the sisterhood. We have a strong sisterhood.
Yes.
Shout out to all the Gayaza girls. You know our support system we have.
Yes.
But so your friends, your praying group. Faith, that was the next one I heard. Faith. We're all of different religions, but having that faith in a higher power, whatever it is that buoys you up in those difficult moments. And then you came back. Let me end with where we started this conversation, and back to what your dad said. Your dad said as you are going to start this job, he said, stick to your principles. My definition of integrity is alignment between what you do and what you say, your professed principles or values. And I think that's what Daddy was trying to teach you and remind you at that time around integrity, which is where you started in terms of what is those fundamental leadership values that's needed in these roles. So, Judy, thank you so much. For those who are watching, or at least even if you're listening, I hope you can hear the strength in her voice. Judy is somebody who's extremely determined, focused, and has that strength. And again, so let those narratives go about we don't have good leaders. Here is an example. We can learn from this example. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, for being here, and for being you. And dear listeners,
thank you very much, Taaka, for having me.
Listeners, viewers, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And see you next time. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. I hope you learned a lot. And if you found value in this conversation, share it with a friend and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like further support on your leadership journey, please get in touch. You can find us on busara-africa.com. And don't forget to follow Busara Africa on all social media platforms.